Hello and welcome to Called Bank Sports. It has been a minute, and boy did we miss a lot of things. And Dale and I are just kind of gonna sit here and chat about it. I mean, we missed the Jazz losing in the first round to the Mavericks. We missed Quin Snyder resigning. We didn't really miss the jerseys last Friday. I think I've personally just been trying to take a deep breath and relax. Wanted to have a bit of a calmer take than I did, you know, last weekend. But I think the more I've just sat around, the more I've stewed. So
The,
we'll see if I say anything that hasn't been said. But I doubt I'm that creative. But Dale, what are you kind of thinking right now?
I do want to note on the jerseys when they brought back the throwback mountain jersey a few years ago. I remember we were talking about it, and you weren't a fan. And now this new set of jerseys, that's the only one that you kind of like. So
I don't remember that discussion. I do really like purple, like it's one of my favorite colors, and I do enjoy the stuff from the 90s, with that Purple Mountain jersey. But it's by no means my favorite. Like it's one of those that I'm fine with the Jazz wearing, but I've definitely always preferred other jerseys over it. So when I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh yay! Like that's the best one. And just really watching the Jazz try to backtrack and just do everything they can to say, yeah, this black, white, and yellow thing, like we don't know how long it's gonna be here, but purple will be here for a long time.
I look,
Is a
wait 2 years,
disaster.
and they're getting rid of that jersey. I bet.
Well, I was reading the Andy Larson piece that he wrote on the Salt Lake Tribune, and he kind of went in depth and said a lot of things that I'm sure he has sources on, but just kind of make intuitive sense. Like the whole big thing was supposed to be the black, white, and yellow. That was supposed to be the whole thing. Like they've been kind of teasing it for a year with the remodel of the practice facility, the changing the note to black, and then like last week they paint the note purple and the first half of the announcement video is purple is here. Um, but he mentions how there's kind of like a set period of time that teams need to keep the colors. Like you can't just be going and changing your color scheme every other year. So it sounds like if the Jazz want to do that, they're going to have to like get some exceptions from the league and from Nike. And I hope they're able to get it. If you're someone who likes those jerseys, please let us know down in the comments below. Like I totally get that some people might like them, but I just really I didn't like moving away from just the colors I've known and loved, and like from kind of the eclectic mix of jerseys that the Jazz have already, and then to see jerseys that, in my opinion, just feel really poorly designed. Like it's not even a I don't like these colors, but just looking at the black and yellow jersey and thinking, could we not have some highlights? Could we not have like a different color trim on the shoulder or just something to add some variety? Like it really just felt like rec league. They feel like rec league uniforms to me. And
that
I don't even know if that's being overly critical.
that's kind of. I'm not against the color scheme. I think there's a lot of cool things you could do with it. I think the court that they made with it is awesome. But I agree with the jerseys. I think they would be the coolest practice jerseys in the league, but they're not great for games. I don't think.
No, they're really not. And the highlighter yellow jersey, just I showed the video to my roommate just because I wanted his opinion on it. And he was trying to like spare my feelings, and I said, "Well, I don't think I like these." And then he just went all out on them. Like he's from New York, doesn't care about the Jazz, doesn't care about basketball, and he just thought that they were hideous. And I'm just kind of like, I know that in business apparently all publicity is good publicity, but like Ryan Smith, I mean, is Qualtrics really that big of a company? Like, how you must have just got so
The
far that you couldn't turn back
well,
with these. Like, they're just not good.
Balltrick stock, it's been dropping hard the past 6 months, so maybe he was just trying to get something going.
Trying to get something going, trying to say, look, things might be going south in other places, but I can put together some terrible pieces of clothing. Um, this is probably a bit of an over exaggeration, or I don't know. I might be being a bit overly dramatic when it comes to this, and I haven't seen it talked about anywhere. But do you think that this affects like how the players feel? Do you think that this kind of can make them skew more negative? I mean, maybe they all like the jerseys. Clarkson said he liked them. I he's a decent
He
actor,
kind of
but not
has
that
to
good.
when the camera's pointed in his face and he's the actor that's like presenting this is like, oh, this is a big deal. Let's hype him up. Like he couldn't say
Yeah,
something bad about it.
he said these are. If you've seen the one of the hype videos on Twitter, he said these are like the coolest jerseys ever. And I'm like, okay, like tone down, like let's take a step back. Like there's a lot of jerseys that are so much cooler than that. So um I'm just wondering though, like things are I'm assuming really negative right now in the Jazz locker room. I mean, it sounds like things really like crap really hit the fan towards the latter part of the season. I mean, even if that wasn't the case, the way that they exited the playoffs, just can't sit good with the team. They definitely had opportunities to be able to pick up wins against the Mavericks and to be able to move on, and they weren't able to do that. Quin Snyder then all of a sudden leaves, who it sounds like maybe there was some maybe not animosity, but maybe the players weren't listening to him as much as they previously had. But that doesn't mean that they're not disappointed to see him go and that they're not concerned about his potential replacement. And so all of this is happening. You have trade rumors swirling around the Jazz, like is Gobert going to Atlanta, Chicago, Toronto? I mean, is it to the point where he just needs to be gone because they're shopping him so much around the league? And then now you get this. Like, I definitely don't think it's the worst thing in the world, but I wonder, is it like the straw that, went from breaking the camel's back to like having the camel be fully paralyzed for life, with like no sign of recovery? I'm rambling at this point, but what are kind of your thoughts on that, Dale? Is
So
there anything there, or am I just being melodramatic,
with Quinn Snyder specifically,
or
um,
just mainly like could these jerseys just be something that's really not that big of a deal, but just bad enough to make things even worse in the locker room? Or if
I
things are bad, are they going to be bad either way?
I don't know if I don't think it will. I think if it has an impact, it's a subliminal impact. I don't think
Yeah.
Mitchell's like going and demanding a trade because he doesn't like the new jerseys. I think it does have a bigger impact on fans though. There's there's like the boulders rolling down the mountain and gaining momentum. It's all negative momentum, and it was just such a big swing with these jerseys that maybe if the Jazz made it to the conference finals in the playoffs, they would have had a better reception. But
Could you imagine if the
I don't know.
Jazz were NBA champions, and the jerseys were revealed at the champion parade, and this is what happened? It's like first title in Utah, ever, and then just all of a sudden it's like, and now dumbest jerseys in the
And
league. Like
turns into a riot.
the difference between those two stories, like that would still be disappointing, but you'd be like, well, the Jazz got the ring, the Jazz got the trophy, like we're good. I mean, I really wonder what the reaction would be. It wouldn't be a happy reaction, but there would be so much joy that it wouldn't matter. And now it's just kind of like, oh, everything's negative right now, and what are we gonna do? Let's make it even worse.
Let's change the one thing that doesn't actually matter, but fans still care about, and make them angrier. Yeah, but with the Jazz, there's a lot of. I'm sure everyone who watches this video has been following what's going on with the Jazz. Um, I I do want to talk about Quinn Snyder a little bit because he's been one of the greatest. Well, he's been one of the best, like winningest coaches in Jazz history. I think he's second behind Jerry Sloan, correct?
Yes, I
Um,
believe so.
and so I think him quitting, like if after he quit, I kind of dug into his history, and um, I don't know if this is. I don't want to put a label on him, but it kind of makes sense. Like at Missouri, he was the coach for Missouri in college, and he did really good with them. There was some NCAA violation drama going on, so he resigned, and he actually said he was going to quit basketball forever, which was fine because he has an MBA and a doctorate in law, which is
Yeah,
insane. So
he has a lot of business
he
experience too. Like he could
he
do
could have
whatever he
done whatever
wants.
he wanted, but then he kind of got into the NBA, G League coaching, assistant coaching, and he ended up with the Jazz. And I think he's a coach where if he wants a job in the NBA, he's going to get a job in the
Yeah,
next year or two. Um, I think him quitting is good for the Jazz in the next, I don't know, 3 to 5 years. I think it's bad for them long term. I think if he could have stuck around, he could have been another Jerry Sloan, where even if we don't have the most talented roster in the world, he would get the Jazz to the playoffs every year. I think that's how good of a coach he is. So it's sad to see him go, but the Jazz are at a point where they need to swing for the fences and get a championship here in the next decade. And
Yeah.
him leaving, I think, is probably the best move for that. It's one of the big things that you can switch up, and you don't really have to worry about the salary cap with coaches as much. So you can find the right fit there.
You don't, and with Danny Ainge leading the search, and I mean I believe the only 2 coaching hires that Danny Ainge has made were Doc Rivers in Boston. And you can say what you want about Doc when it comes to, kind of persistent playoff, falling short consistently in the playoffs. But I mean, he did win a title
when
in Boston.
When Ainge hired him, he got the chip.
Yeah, he got the chip. And I mean, he's one of the best coaches in the league. If Doc Rivers wanted to come to Utah right now, I'd have concerns, but I wouldn't want to say no just because he has consistently shown that he can win and put together winning teams. Maybe not always to the championship level, but that he can build teams with a lot of success. And then he hired, Butler head coach. What's his name?
That's right. I'm seeing his face right now.
I am at Adam Stevens, Brad
Stevens.
Brad Stevens. I want to say
Adam Silver.
This is so pathetic. Yes, Adam Silver. No, but then he hired, I believe, Brad Stevens. Let's confirm this right now.
Yeah, that's him.
Okay, Brad Stevens. Awesome. Then he hired Brad Stevens, who did a lot of good in Boston. Like, you look at what people expected from pulling the Butler head coach, like, who had no NBA experience, and being able to construct a good team and to be able to help them a lot. And yeah, it took Ime Udoka, I believe, if I'm probably butchering that name, to, get Boston to the title this year. But Stevens still would have had a shot. But that's also the change there, where you had Stevens, who had done a lot of good things with the Celtics, and you bring in a new voice. And what happens the next year? All of a sudden, they're in title contention, and until they fall apart, kind of towards the end of the playoffs, it looked like they were going to beat the Warriors in 5 or 6 and bring home the trophy.
They were my pick from the first round. So I'm not mad that the Warriors won, but I'm kind of upset that my pick didn't win.
Oh no, definitely. So taking a look at that and thinking, like, what if the Jazz do keep Gobert? What if they're able to make a small change, like ship Rudy Gay out, possibly upgrade, at least from a size and athleticism kind of standpoint? They're able to, sorry, my mind is just wandering. They're able to trade Mike Conley to get a bit more size and athleticism. Just things like that. Like, the Jazz could be going to the title next year. Obviously, these are big ifs. I mean, there's 30 teams. Like, only 2 of them can get there. If the Jazz want to do it, they're going to have to, go through these rising teams like the Mavericks and the Grizzlies. They're going to have to go through teams like the Suns and the Warriors. Like, you can never count out LeBron James. And maybe we're getting to the point where you're going to start doing it depending on what happens in the offseason. But I do have hope for this hire. I think Ainge can go out and make a good hire. There's very few people that I would be really concerned to see the Jazz go higher. I think the biggest one would be Frank Vogel. I know that he didn't get maybe the best shot in Los Angeles, but just Frank Vogel has never been a very good offensive coach. He is a pretty good defensive coach. I don't think I want to see the Jazz pick him up. Terry Stotts.
I don't think he's even in contention right now.
I've heard his name
the Jazz
mentioned,
have a list of 15 people, so probably everyone's in contention at this point. But
I think Stotts from Portland, that could be really good for Donovan Mitchell developing. you'd want to get some good defensive minds around him. But he has had some years where things have worked out okay defensively for him. So how much of it is just not having good pieces? But then again, the Jazz don't have the best defensive pieces right now. In the end, though, I mean, I'm fine if the Jazz go pick up, a G League head coach or something like that. If they go pick up an assistant, there's really nobody who I know of right now who I would just think, crap, I don't want them to be coaching. And in the end, Danny Ainge is a much better basketball mind than me. So I'm honestly just kind of fine putting things in his hands and just interested to see where it goes.
I do have one concern with the Danny Ainge, not his hire, but who he might hire.
Okay.
So we think about Doc Rivers. I give him credit. It was a great hire. I think it was also an obvious hire in that case. It was Doc
From
Rivers.
what I hear, it
was a Boston guy. He was out there. Like I don't know the whole process. I don't know the history there. And then Brad Stevens, I think, was an excellent hire, but he was an X's and O's guy. And I think he's one of the best X's and O's guys out there. And that's one of the reasons why he couldn't make it through the playoffs, is because he had a lot of star power there and he couldn't manage them. And you kind of need that talent manager. You kind of need that personality manager, that locker room guy. And so the second Brad Stevens leaves, brings in Ime Udoka, they get to the finals. And so I'm curious if Danny Ainge, he's a great basketball mind. He knows the X's and O's. And I wonder if because a lot of times what we've seen, I think recently, and this may be an incorrect conclusion, but I've started noticing that if you look at like when the Lakers won their championship or when other teams are winning, the Dallas Mavericks, I don't think it's all on Jason Kidd that they did so good. I think Jason Kidd has some excellent assistant coaches. He's actually bringing over a ton of assistants from when the Lakers won that championship with Anthony Davis and LeBron James. So I think the head coach kind of needs to be the manager. He needs to be able to motivate players. He needs to get Donovan Mitchell to play a little harder on defense. And then he can get those talent guys like Jason Kidd. There's an assistant where that assistant takes care of all the defensive stuff, and Jason Kidd is kind of organizing things, like managing the talent that he has. And so, not that the Mavericks won a championship or anything, but they outperformed all expectations. And so
definitely.
I think what the Jazz need to be looking for, and I think Danny Ainge might be, I don't know what he's thinking, and he knows more than me. Whoever he hires is probably better than the hire I would end up making. But I think he needs to look for someone who is more of a locker room guy, a manager of talent, who has some influence, who can bring over some really solid assistant coaches. And the assistant coaches can work with Rudy Gobert and give him some post moves and work with Donovan Mitchell on his shot to improve it a little bit, or work on his footwork on defense and those like little specific things. And maybe he has a couple, like an offensive coordinator and a defensive coordinator like you have in football, who do a lot of the X's and O's, and that coach is just making sure people are on the same page and people are doing what they need to win. So that's one concern based off of his past hires. He hired a championship coach, but I think Doc Rivers might be more of those X's and O's guy based off of his previous performance in the playoffs. I'm seeing a lot of those. Frank Vogel, I think, is an excellent basketball mind, but maybe he's better as an assistant and doing that more specific stuff. And when he had all the great assistants around him, that's when they won a championship.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And David Locke actually did a really good interview with Danny Ainge. That's over on the Utah Jazz YouTube channel, and asked a lot of questions about who he's looking for, like you were talking about, the X's and O's and the kind of management side. And that interview really gave the vibe that he is looking for someone to, I think he said, like, manage the chaos. I don't know if that's perfect. An exact quote. And that's kind of did seem more the route he's looking to go down, where the Jazz do have talented players. And it'll be really interesting to see what the roster is going to be look like come opening day. Like my dad was debating between purchasing a Bogey jersey or a Clarkson jersey, and I was like, well, whichever one you choose, the other one you might not be able to get a jersey for them here in the next few months. Like there's a lot of volatility right now with this roster. But in the end, what the Jazz need is someone to be able to manage the locker room, whose voice is going to be heard, and to just make sure that the players are more unified than it seemed like they were towards the end of the season. I do feel like Quin Snyder maybe could have worked things out with another year. But in the end, he knows things a lot better than I do. And like you said, I do think a shakeup here isn't the worst thing in the world. And I am happier to see Quin step away than Quin get fired, since I just think that would be really sad. And it is going to be really kind of disappointing to me if Gobert gets traded, or if Mitchell gets traded, or I mean, if that happens with a lot of players. Like I think losing Joe was really hard, and that was something that I could at least emotionally prepare for, knowing that that was what was going to happen, just based on he can't play, he's an expiring contract. Like these are going to be the steps that are taken, and right now everything's just up in the air. And I honestly right now think that it's better for the Jazz to have Rudy Gobert next year from an X's and O's standpoint. But obviously, like we've been talking about, there's a lot more than X's and O's when it comes to basketball. And you've got to be able to work together, and you have to be able to have an environment that you feel like you can succeed in. And right now, it seems like there might be some players who think that that environment can only exist if things change and if certain people possibly aren't there.
Yeah, and with that, I think this coaching hire could. I don't know what Danny Ainge is thinking for the offseason. The Jazz really don't have many options other than trades, and they're going to pick up a player for the taxpayer mid-level exception, which will be, think, Rudy Gay level player. That's kind of what the Jazz will bring in. So if the Jazz want, and if they find the right coach who believes in the core, everyone's been talking about trading a star. The Jazz might keep the core together. And so I'm kind of interested, is that what you would prefer? Would you rather find a coach who's confident in this core and then saying, hey, let's go? Do you think the Jazz can, with the right coach, can go contend with this core? Or do you think there needs to be some major mix-up, either that being trading a star in Gobert or Mitchell, or trading other key starters like on Mike Conley, who, by the way, he has 2 years left. So next season and the season after, both are over $20 million. So he's kind of stuck with the Jazz for the next 2 years at a pretty big cut of the cap. Like, what do you want to look like? Make big moves or just make some small tweaks with a new coach and see what happens?
I think that Mike needs to get moved. Just solely based on, I mean, he had a great regular season last year and then struggled in the playoffs. I think that just a lot of what has hurt the Jazz is having a 6-foot backcourt isn't really helping anyone. Like Donovan's really small, and if you slide him over to point guard, he's not as small. But you need someone bigger at shooting guard, just defensively. I mean, the more space you take up, the harder it is to get around you. Like that's just simple physics. And right now they don't really have that. So I do think that Conley is the move that I'd like to see. I don't know what you can get for him. I don't know his value in the league. But that's a move I think is going to happen. And as for that, I'd like the Jazz to at least bring in a new coach and see what happens for the first little bit. And if you need to get off Gobert or get off Mitchell midseason, as long as you feel like you're not losing value because of that, I think that that's probably a bit better than making two or three big changes at once. I think trying to limit that to, maybe like a big change with the coach and a couple of, smaller changes when it comes to the roster.
Yeah, I think that's probably the route the Jazz are going to go, unless they can get the right trade. It's like Danny Ainge says, there are no untouchable players for the right deal. I don't think the Jazz are going to get the trade that the Jazz want for either Mitchell or Gobert. And so I think they either find a coach that believes in the core and thinks they can win a championship with this core, or they the only other strategy is do the like 1 to 2 year rebuild. And so rather than what the Thunder are doing of just picking up a bunch of draft picks, it's more of a rebuild of have the pieces around with the expectation that you can get a big name free agent to come in and open up salary cap that way, which is really risky when you're a small market like Utah. I know there are a lot of players who like Utah, but the big name stars, they know they're not going to max out their earning potential in a place like Utah. So I think that's a risky route, and that would include trading basically your veterans. So you would need to find a trade for Gobert that gets you back some young pieces, and a trade for Mitchell, and you could probably keep Bojan because he has 1 year left, and you can keep Clarkson because I think he's good value for. He has 2 more years at like $12 million, which I think is good value for him. But I think it's the only other option, and that would only work if the Jazz if a team like the Hawks are just so anxious to get another star on the team that they trade John Collins, 3 picks, and 2 other young stars. And I think that would be the only thing that like you could, or not young stars, but young talent that you could kind of get depth around. But I don't see the Jazz doing that, and I don't see the Hawks doing that.
Or if all of a sudden Oklahoma City wants to offer, 15 first round picks in conjunction with the trade.
They just need to fill up their cap
They
space.
just change the rosters. It's just a straight up roster swap, send Shea over here and, just whoever they pick up.
How many picks, if they traded Shea for Donovan, how many picks would it take for you to accept that trade?
I think you could get 3 or 4 for it, and I'd probably be. Shea has some big upside.
I think Shea right now is slightly worse than Donovan, and so he has the potential to be better. So if you could get 4 picks plus, and Shea,
so does Donovan.
I might take it.
Donovan still. Is this going to be his 5th year in the league? Like this next season? He's still got so much time to improve, and he has kept improving each year. So it'll be exciting. There's definitely a lot of positives, for the Jazz, and that doesn't mean that things aren't rough right now. But I'm doing my best to, not have a woe or us, and everything's going to hell. But we'll see how it goes here. But anything else you want to say before we wrap up, Dale?
One thing, this is kind of more housekeeping. I know we took a big break. Nate was out of country for a while. I graduated. I had a kid. It's been a crazy month or so. But we did want to give updates that keep subscribed, stay subscribed to the channel. We're going to keep putting stuff out, not as often as we did, but we want to keep talking about the Jazz and kind of building a community here. So don't unsubscribe from us yet. We're not a dead channel at this point. We just took a break, and we're going to start putting out videos about once a month, and we'll see where that takes us.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys again for watching, and it's hard to say right now, but go Jazz.